today what I hope to become an annual series where we discuss different aspects of what our plants need to grow and flower nicely for us. Um, I chose fertilizers mainly because I know that Mike Vivier has got a fortune of experience in this field. Mind you, he does everything else as well because he's chief propagator at Random Harvest Nursery. I'm not sure how many of you know Random Harvest. It's out Beyersnodere Drive just before the Krugersdorp Highway. So if you're looking for plants and you're going up towards the northwest, if you see Lifestyle Nursery, carry on straight. If you see Garden World, carry on straight. And then somewhere there, you'll see signs to go to the right to Random Harvest. They have quite a nice newsletter once a month. If anybody wants it, just email Linda at rhn.co.za, RHN being Random Harvest Nursery. They do lots of things there, garden landscaping, birding. They've got cottages and all sorts of things. Really nice place to go. I think you should all go and support them. They are really great. But one of the things about the nursery is that a lot of what you buy there, they grow on site. Many other nurseries just buy in and sell, and hopefully sell before the plants go all floppy. But Mike really has a good system going there, and I know that over the years he's tried all sorts of funny things from essential oils to volcano dust to you know it. He's tried it. Thank you very much, Mike, for chatting to us, and let's have a good evening. Thanks, Mike.
Oh, Lord, it's now over to me.
Yes.
Okay, welcome, everybody. I don't think I have to introduce myself. Gerard has done that. I was told this is going to be a 40-minute talk. I will have to disappoint you. You can't talk for longer than about 15 minutes on fertilizer. Now, there's a couple of things we need to clear out. Before 1900, 1910, somewhere there, you would never have picked up the word fertilizer in literature. You would read that you have to compost the veld, you would read you have to manure the veld, you would read anything. Fertilizer did not exist. Then, as a byproduct of the munitions company, or companies then, we got soluble NP and K out, and we had to find the use. And what better soil than plants? So fertilizers were born. Once fertilizer was born, it's like COVID. Everybody's got a sort of a idea about it. Everybody's got an opinion about it, whether it's right or wrong, we don't care. I mean, let's just take the most common one. You know, I have a bit of problem with my lemon tree. Oh, give it magnesium sulfate. I gave mine a cup full of magnesium sulfate and it has not stopped bearing lemons ever. And I'm thinking, dear Lord Jesus. Okay, so when it gets to fertilizer, I'm going to ask a question, and I don't know, Gerard, how people are going to respond, but I was told it's interactive. What is the difference between organic and inorganic fertilizer?
I'm scared to say that I think they're the same.
Now, you're a chemist. Go to the corner of the class.
No, my dad's a nuclear physicist, so I have no choice but to believe him.
Chemically, that answer is correct because chlorine is chlorine, sodium is sodium. So how do we get it into the camps of organic and inorganic? Because chemically, you are bullseye.
I guess inorganic, your carrying agent is something like chalk, whereas in natural fertilizers, it's something like protein or I don't know. So the basis is a natural origin.
Yeah, surely the natural is anything that's as it would be in nature, and anything that's chemically produced is inorganic, not from nature.
It's the way it's derived.
I have a different definition. From chemistry, I know that anything that contains carbon is an organic compound, and anything that doesn't contain carbon is an inorganic compound. So presumably, you know, for example, magnesium sulfate, that chemical doesn't contain carbon at all. So it would be classed as an inorganic compound, and maybe organic fertilizers have a lot of organic compounds because they are decomposed organic material, in other words, plants, whereas the others are just inorganic material, goodness knows what, magnesium sulfate, whatever.
So you say calcium carbonate is an organic chalk.
I think
Yeah,
if
but
there's
if you-
only
if
one
you-
carbon in it, then they don't say it's inorganic, then that's still inorganic.
But if you're growing organic vegetables and you want it to be certified as organic, then I think that's the definition we should be looking at.
In that case, it implies its origin is from animals or a compost heap or something like that, but not a
Natural.
factory.
Naturally derived. Even if it's in a chicken manure in pellet form,
Organically
it's
derived.
considered organic.
Mike's worked out how to make us do the whole talk.
Yeah. Okay, Mike, relieve us.
Okay, no, it's just an interesting question to ask because we've had two chemists here. I can't see their names now, and they came in with the right chemical answer. NPK, nitrogen is nitrogen. So the real answer is, or lies in the fact that, if you look at our bodies, and you do a swab of anybody's nose, ears, or not a COVID swab, please. Swab of nose, ears, throat, or whatever, you're going to pick up quite a few bacteria. And let's look at E. coli, Escherichia coli, or Staphylococcus aureus. Okay. By themselves, we immediately say like, oh my God, I need to drink antibiotics. But I will pick it up in a healthy person with no infections. So those bacteria exist and we don't know why. Now, if you think the bacterial population, us, is big, in the soil, it is absolutely, it's mind-boggling. Okay. Scientists have calculated that if all bacteria stop operating now, within 30 minutes, the first deaths will occur on the planet. And within a week, there won't be a planet with people anymore. Okay, so the answer to the question is NP and K, water soluble, is inorganic. NP and K bound to a bacterium is organic. So bacteria, they have one job in life, and that's to hold on to whatever floats past them. Okay, so you will remember in the 60s, the whole DDT, Rachel Carson, all that, and things were washing to the sea, and things were getting into birds' eggs, and the only reason it happened is because we have, like the Gideonites, you know, when you get to the hotel room, the Gideonites was there. We have covered the earth in NP and K. Okay, so all the bacteria are hanging onto NP and K. But plants can only demand, and plants feed themselves. You don't have to feed them. The unfortunate thing is if you do get them a bit of soluble NPK, they do react. Soon after the good reaction, let's call it that, the bad reaction sets in. We do etiolated cell walls, we do thinner cell walls, we do what we call biased brixes. So nothing is natural anymore. And the insects of the world just sit there and think, hallelujah, look at this. Okay, the plant has lost its own defenses. So we have to go back to basics. Are you wanting to ask something, Darryl?
Yeah, no.
Oh, okay. we have to go back to basics. And basics is pre-soluble NPK. Now I went to, after Gerard asked me, I went to, what's this place's name up the street? You spoke about it now. Lifestyle. Lifestyle has got 83 formulations of fertilizer. So which one are you going to take? And it becomes a bit of a, I asked a question here at random the other day, and somebody put up their hand and she said, die een met die mooi blommetjies op. So that's one way to choose it. You choose the one with the mooi blommetjies op. But the thing is, really, and people take serious offense, we don't know. Just a quick shout, is everybody au fait with the word factorial or the mathematical principle of factorial? For those who don't know, 1 factorial is 1. It's the figure, all the figure, oh no, if it's 3 factorial implies 3 times 2 times 1. 4 is 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Okay? No questions. So if you have NPK, that's 3. You have 6 possible recombinations of NPK, which we think we can manage. If you have 6, which is nowadays the sort of average nutrient listing on the packet, you have more than 720, or not more, you have exactly 720 recombinations. Okay, and is there anybody that would like to sort out succulents from that perspective? It becomes impossible. So in agriculture, you can pay up to 18,000 Rand and you have a Mulder's wheel done for you. Mulder's wheel has got about, the most expensive one, it's got about 18 chemicals. It shows antagonisms and reactions, what goes with what, and if there's too much of this, then it binds up that. And I'm thinking, well, you know what, if you start digging in the soil, there's 104 elements. And do you want to recombine those lot? So now we look at the organic, okay? So stop buying water-soluble chemicals. Please do. Please do. Start buying organic, or just start ameliorating your soil and get it back to normal. So now we are not going to look at things like bokashi. We are not going to look at things like earthworms castings. We are not going to look at, I mean, all those things, compost tea. I mean, how's this for science? You make your compost heap, you brew your compost, you've got a wonderful compost, then you dissolve all the nutrients in it by steeping it for a week or so and bubbling water through it, and then you water everything with compost tea. I mean, is that not the definition of insane? Make your compost, put your compost back in the ground. Once you take, what you need in your ground is bacteria. You need bacteria, bacteria, bacteria. There is a company in Durban that manufactures a thing called EM, which is for efficient microbes. And they'll help you. You calculate your garden's volume and you do a one-time application. This is not, we need to get away from the annual. We need to fertilize today. Get away from it. So what happens now in the soil is these bacteria sit, you add more bacteria, and they start binding up all the loose water-soluble nutrients that flow into the Yixke, that flow into the Hartepeespodam, that grows wonderful water hyacinth. Oh my God, I've just gone dark. Oh, there we go, we're back. So they start binding up these nutrients and then on demand from the plant. And that could be anything. Plants actually mobilize arsenic. We can only think it's because of maybe pest control. But plants have adapted over the past couple of million years. And we're trying to, I'm going to step on toes now. We're trying to tell plants what they need, but they actually don't need us. They were happy without us. So we start doing let's call it artificial mixes and pots. That's what Homo sapiens do. But then go for the least disruptive. So the least disruptive is succulents usually, and please keep usually in mind, come from soils that are organically slightly depauperate. Okay, deserts, that's where you get your succulents. If you go to Richtersveld or if you go to Knersvlakte, those are organically reasonably carbon poor. You usually float between 4 and 10%, which is low. If you go into a grass biome, you can go up to 50% organic carbon. Okay, so you have a low carbon thing. So it doesn't bode well for the future of your succulent if you put it in a nice organic fluffy mix. They're not used to it. Of course, if it comes out of the forest or whatever, you'll have to play around a little bit. You need to take ecosystems into. But if it's from a desert area, sandy, rocky data, and you feed from the top with a little sprinkling of compost or what the case might be. Now, in the sort of organic biome, there are things that are very acceptable. One of them is rock dust. Oh.
Yes,
Okay, what's happening?
Sorry, I think it's been resolved now.
Okay, cool. I've lost my place. Okay, so one of the things that we sorely advocate is rock dust, for the simple reason that it contains 76 water insoluble compounds, not compounds, elements. Okay, how do they become soluble? The bacteria attaches itself to it, and then on demand from whatever is growing in that stuff, it releases it. The application rate is very low. You must just be able to notice it. Then that is agriculturally, it's 2 tons a hectare. So and 2 tons a hectare, you actually have to stand a while and sort of look hard, and then you can see a little sprinkling here, sprinkling there. You can't overfeed with rock dust, but it's just going to cost you more money for absolutely no effect. Okay, EM, simply because we've buggered around the bacteria in the ground so much, or in your pot even, that it's just nice for a once-off to replenish all the soil bacteria, and after that, they will maintain themselves, providing you don't do food things like putting a kilogram of magnesium sulfate down to make your lemons bed. So if you look at the world scene, and I know this is a bit wider than succulents, but if you look at the world scene, we are losing more than 60%, and I cannot tell you to how many trillions of tons of food it translates because of overuse of fertilizers. Because we overuse fertilizers, we have to overuse pesticides and fungicides and herbicides and sides until it comes out of your head. And we're actually going downhill. If you read any agricultural sort of forum, everybody is reporting they need to use more and more fertilizer to get the same effect. It's absolutely madness. Madness, madness, madness. Okay, compost, possibly your best friend. So do a good compost. And here's the horrific now. If you do a compost and you're worried about this is or that is, you can throw a handful of LAN 232515, any, go buy all 83 from Lifestyle, chuck it into your compost, leave it there for a year, and the bacteria will pick that up. Now, a lot of people will say like, the bacteria. No doubt all of you know about Chernobyl. The first or the second year after their meltdown. And now Chernobyl to Russia is like the Free State to us. It's the bread bin of. So in the second or third year, they grew veg in the Chernobyl area. And yep, you only had to sort of put it on the plate. It was hot. So now, if you think about it, what will a plant do with something like radium, uranium? I mean, it's got absolutely no use in plant physiology. So they grew veg and it did not go very well. Then they got the French in and they said to the French, listen here, you guys are the organic queens and kings of the world. And the French moved in with an absolute, what do you call it, Mercedes-Benz of organic models. And they EM'd and they did the whole thing. And as we speak here today, if I can believe internet, which also is doubtful, but Chernobyl is actually delivering veg into the European Union again. And you can imagine, if you know this comes from Chernobyl, they test that stuff inside out. But it's clean. Why? Because bacteria are holding onto the radioactive nuclides, and no plant is ever going to ask for it. So it's inactivated. The area is still as hot as hell. You still have to go in with your bitty suit if you want to plant or harvest. But the plant itself is regulating its environment. And that is possibly the most important thing about fertilizing of any plant, not only succulents. You can supply, we actually kill with kindness or with impatience. You know, this lithophile needs to double in size or whatever the case may be. Succulents are not fast growers in nature. If you've ever been to Knarsvlakte, or if you've ever been to Richtersveld, I mean, it's absolutely harrowing out there. You get very little rain. There are some nutrients there, but the succulents are healthy. Seldom do you see a succulent that's stressing or healthy guy, because it modulates its own needs. If I need, let's just make it a nitrogen, I can release or whatever into the soil, which will activate the bacteria to release it in. And so it's a very, I want 3, I get 3. It's not when you come in with your little Gideonite hand and put down a handful. I always say the analogy is, you come to Random Harvest, we're going to give you a 2-hour talk. We have a sink building, and it's December month and it's hot. And Linda has wonderful hamburgers. We haven't tasted them. So we're sitting in this building and there are drinks. There need to be drinks because it's 40 degrees outside. But there's just one rule. And the rule says you can have a Coke or a water or whatever you want to drink if you have a hamburger as well. So for the first 3 hamburgers, that's a very good deal. But by the 4th Coke, you now don't want another hamburger, but that's the rule. If you want a Coke, you need to, you want a glass of water, you need to eat a hamburger. Can you see where this is going? By the, oh God, somebody was dying out there. By the 10th glass of water, you are now like, you don't want to see a hamburger ever again. This is what we do to our plants. We dissolve this shit, which is the leftover from a world war, in water. We give it to our plants, and the plant says, actually, I'm thirsty. I would just like drinking. So we can drink, but you're going to have NPK and all this crap we put in bags and sell as lifestyle. So you just have to eat and drink. And can you see where the whole ecosystem or the whole ecosystem of the plant just goes downhill? Boom. The plant can't control that, so it eats and drinks, because that is what we dictate. You must have this water-soluble rubbish. So switch back to organic. Don't buy water-soluble. Bad idea. Water-soluble is a bad idea. If you go away tonight and remember nothing except that water-soluble is a bad idea, that would be good. Now, lastly, and I told you it wasn't really long, we've been working with liposomes. Now, liposome is basically a fat, and I'm not going to bore you with the whole story. But the liposomes we produce now at the moment are what we call high density fats. They're 18, 20, 22s. And when we started 4 years ago, we did a blind testing on a tomato that was just dipped in the stuff and planted in Paris soils. Now, if you know Paris soils, that is something to behold. It's like red, hard. But the tomato grew very well. And when it came to plucking time, what we use as a control is I just went to town and bought ZZ, is it ZZ3? That company that does tomatoes and stuff, because they're arguably the biggest organic farmers in the country. And in a blind test, everybody chose the Paris tomato as the best tasting. So you get a blindfold on, something gets shoved in your hand, you eat, you say good, bad, indifferent. So now the question becomes one of, if we didn't add any fertilizer into that soil, why? And what happens is these liposomes actually go through the cellular, the bark or the stem of the plant. It takes about 30 seconds in the inside. And then this is now where it gets a bit hairy. They're off to the jasmonic sites, jasmonic acid sites, which regulates your plant's immunity, and B, it regulates all the processes that's happening in the plant. So what has happened there is, obviously, there was a downflow into the soil. There was an activation of the bacteria because the silly old Paris tomato was just better than ZZ3's highly organic. We're talking to the Swiss at the moment, and the professor said, this is the future of feeding plants. I've been trying to do this for 20 years. So everybody's very excited about it. It's absolutely strange science. I'm not going to bother you with it. You can get some of the stuff here at random. It is for sale. It is actually quite cheap. Your dosage rate is 5 ml a liter. And wow, it works wonders. So I foresee that within the next 15 years, you won't be able to buy fertilizer in Lifestyle or any other nursery, because it's just archaic. It was a wrong turn we took 100 years ago, and it's time to turn back. Cool. I don't think there's anything more to say. Yeah, I think, Gerard, questions?
Yeah, one interesting question would be, you talk about the natural mycorrhiza in the soil. Is that a kind of constant, or would you have a certain zoo of mycorrhiza in, say, a quartzitic soil, and a granitic soil would be something else, and a clay would have a different kind of group of mycorrhiza?
It's even more complex than that. So instead of going across several geologies like you did now, take one geology, let's say granite, and then take north, east, west, south aspect. And I guarantee you the populations are different. Okay, so with this EM, which I'm advocating, you basically restore the workers, the hard workers, but each and every site will have idiosyncratic to that site. If it's been sort of tampered with and disturbed, the spores will be there. So these little workers will activate the spores again. But you will have, in each site, you will have different populations of bacteria. This is why, and this it doesn't cut through to succulents, why crop rotation is such a bad thing. A tomato will gather, let's say, 10 specific bacteria around it. You can go anywhere in the country, they will have those 10 bacteria. Now, Auntie Nutty, that's read up all about this. And crop rotation came in because we actually deplete the soil with our fertilizers, and then eelworms come in and da-da-da. But I tell you what, there is nothing that grows as bad or as badly as a cabbage planted in soil where a tomato grew last year. Because the cabbage goes into the soil and is looking around like, I don't know any of these guys I'm seeing around here. So we did various experiments, and the best tomatoes was grown in soil that had tomatoes in it last year. And the best cabbages was grown in soil that had cabbages in it last year.
Interesting.
And because each plant has got its own demands on the system, don't stress the system with chemistry. Because then you'll get a little population of whatever your succulent needs, your pot plant needs, your garden needs, and keep it like so. If you get eelworm in, you are stuffing up somewhere along the way. Eelworms are necessary. They are absolutely bone necessary. They promote root branching and all the rest of it. Mycorrhiza, absolutely necessary. If you ever hear about Phytophthora or wilt or those things, it's because we've depleted the mycorrhiza. And mycorrhiza is just a blanket term for fungi in the soil. You get endomycorrhiza, which are like the bones in your arm, or ectomycorrhiza, which is like a glove. So it's either over the root or into the root. We know of several succulents that behave, or not behave very well, but respond very well to mycorrhizals. And I should have given you the address. I will give I'll mail the address to Gerard and he can put it out in the group. But it's quite expensive to buy a packet. It's about 600, 700 rand for 100 grams. But you use a tip of a teaspoon to plant, so it lasts for years. It's just the producing company don't do smaller than, I think it's 100 grams. It's wonderful stuff, just for the garden, but also for your succulents. It protects them. It helps feeding them. It sort of increases the root zone by up to 300%. Okay. So you can actually now stress your plant with a little bit less water. Okay, in a pot plant, the one thing you'll have to do is you need to have a very, very well draining mixture. For the simple reason that it's not well draining, the water is going to sit. If the water sits, you start drowning bacteria and you start dissolving nutrients again. And guess what? You're back to square one. What is going on here? So having thrown all those indicators into a pot, it must be clear to everybody here that it is quite complex, but the simpler you make it, the better it starts working. And the more you tamper, and do yourself a favor, if you really want to giggle yourself, go sit at Lifestyle in the fertilizer section. And it's like a carbohydrate dependent person in a sweetie aisle. You know, they go and they think, oh, I need some of this, and then they need some of this, and by the end, very few people walk out with less than 6 or 7 bags of fertilizer. With what they're going to do with it, I don't know, because surely you must realize by now that each and every plant will have its own idiosyncratic demand of what will make that plant happy. And a lot of that is what we call site locality. So let's speak about Euphorbia shinzii. Euphorbia shinzii, I will find blindfolded for you, because I know exactly where it sits. It sits where the upheaval in the soil has caused these verticals, and they grow in there and in the story. They do not move into the open felt. So, and I can tell you that where they grow, there's going to be, if you want to be as mad as to analyze the soil, it's going to be completely different as to where Kalanchoe, Versiflora, Lucii, Paniculata grows. Okay, so the plants are telling you, I have got a different demand than that guy. And all we can do is say, okay, we'll give you the organic parts of the puzzle, and the plant will sort itself out. Okay, I don't have much more to say. Now, really, questions.
I see there's a question from Erhard in the chat, and he says, what is the importance of pH and the total dissolved solids of irrigation water?
There I can see it as well. That unfortunately has an impact, because you must realize that in the natural system, it would have received rainwater. So we start living in groups, and we call them cities, and we pump water, and you do get skewed pHs. You also do get skewed nutrient, and those nutrients are, by the way, they are water soluble. So the only thing you can do to ameliorate that is make sure that your soil is buffered well with bacteria, i.e. whatever you put on top to get the bacteria going. A lot of plants are totally impervious to this. They don't. We here at Random, we've got a pH of about 7.7, which is sort of tending towards the alkaline. None of the plants worry about that. But if you have a valuable collection, and I can't think of any succulents that are full of nonsense now. Most of these things are buffered because also your soil, I mean, the soil from Swartkops to Midrand is like vastly different, but you can still grow the same succulents in them. So there's definitely a seesaw going on. You can handle this as long as it is not all water soluble. So if you have, let's think, something like Edithcola grandis, that is where I would start buying bottled water for it, because you only need 2 or 3 teaspoons or whatever a week to keep the thing wet. But I definitely wouldn't stress its growth just because it's A, rare, and B, it is a full of nonsense succulent. So I wouldn't give it limestoney or sort of high pH or very low pH. Well, we're not bothered with low pH. The Cape is really bothered with low pH. But yeah, so Erhard, the answer is, I think, just carry on. And the answer is, it's going to be more important in a big system where you go a hectare of. But in a big system where you go a hectare of, it's very easy to manipulate your soil so there's enough bacteria to handle whatever comes out of your borehole or wherever your water source is.
Awesome. My question is, we often have a concern with succulents, particularly with rot. So as soon as you introduce a significant amount of organic matter, you introduce rot. And I know that a lot of people, and I've always thought that this is a bit strange, but what they do is they pasteurize whatever compost they're applying to their pots. So when they're repotting, they microwave it or whatever. And then obviously there you're killing whatever you would think is the essential probiotic that you've created in this compost. So what's your recommendation there? Is it just that if you're getting rot, you've overstepped the mark and put too much compost in, or is it watering regime? How do we balance those two needs?
The first one is don't put compost in the soil. Okay, and now the great generalization will follow is where succulents come from, or where most succulents come from, there is no organic. If you look at lithops in the Karoo, I mean, the Karoo is a pretty grim situation, okay? But there's no compost in the soil. As a matter of fact, you need a pick to break that soil crust. But what happens is the water usually washes the lithop into a corner or under a bush or whatever the case may be. And then the leaves and stuff collect around the lithop. So all your organic addition is from above, not from within. Okay, so putting compost into your mixture is not a good idea. Sterilizing it, well, that's buying time because, believe you me, bacteria, I mean, do I need to say more than COVID, Delta variant? They run around. you will inoculate that pot, whether you like it or not. Whether you've sterilized or not, you will inoculate that pot within 6 months. The bad thing is if you do what we call a mono inoculation, let's say, not a rhizobium is friendly. Let's say a fusarium comes along. The fusarium is going to say thank you because there is this wonderful sterile. Sterile to the fusarium means I don't have competition at all. So it multiplies, it fills the pot, and it eats your plants. One cut. Okay, so you want as many possible bacteria in that soil, but if it's a succulent, do not add the compost into the soil, add from the top. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, sir? Thank you. And just to follow up from that, so let's say we're not adding compost at all. How do we return the mycorrhiza and the essential microecology of, so we're growing in pots, is the only way to do it through EM as you've suggested, or will it naturally occur as time passes, and would adding compost to the top as you've suggested begin that process?
Yes. Depending on how much you battle. I just spoke to a collector last week, and he's got serious aphid problems and woolly aphids and things on the root, but they made this wonderful, or what feels to us as wonderful. I've made that mistake a million times. I sort of play with this one and think, wow, this is a good medium. Believe me, it always goes wrong. So make your mix. And okay, let's start with, you have a problem with your collection. There's always things going wrong. And I would calculate, let's say you need half a cube of soil. Then do the mix without compost. Do your rock dust and all the additions you want to do, water with EM. And then you maintain those bacteria that you put in with putting compost on the top, or in, filling the pot space around the plant. And those bacteria can actually, they can move down in the soil. They're actually very mobile. And if you look at the larger soil profile, you start dividing up, because after 10 centimeters, different things start happening. Most of us don't have pots bigger than 10 centimeters. Because you get guys that photosynthesize, photosynthesizing bacteria. When you go down to about 15 centimeters, you get bacteria that never sees the sun, and they actually start using all kinds of elements to complete the energy cycle, the Krebs cycles and stuff. So, and that's why plowing, which is not part of this talk, is a bad idea, because the guys from 15 centimeters come up to the sun, they shriek and scream because they've never seen the sun. And the guys that can actually use the sunlight to, let's call it photosynthesize and create food for the plant, they get put down 30 centimeters and they know, what the hell am I doing here? There's no sun here. So the no-till sort of school holds a very valid thing there. So back to succulents, make your poor, well-drained thing, add rock dust, and you can, my only sort of complaint against water soluble is you are growing a soft succulent, and succulents are not soft. They, by definition, are tough. If you start growing with rock dust, you will be absolutely horrified to see how well a succulent can grow. And if you sort of think, rock dust, by the way, if you haven't seen it before, looks like cement. Is it cement? Yeah, it's cement, not concrete. Cement, the powder. It's gray. And you realize this stuff is absolutely not water soluble. And yet the plant makes it available to itself, and you really get healthy succulents with rock dust and EM. Okay, more? I love it.
Tell me, is it correct to say that every single plant has some sort of mycorrhiza associated with it? Because I've always thought that it was only certain plants. But what I'm hearing from you is that it's not only certain plants, but all plants?
No. It's certain plants. Okay. So I can't give you an example in succulents, for instance, now that are impervious to mycorrhiza, but all the mesons or the Azoraceae, so that would be your Lampranthus, your lithops, they are what we call obligate mycorrhizal hosts. So they actually need that mycorrhiza on their roots to keep them healthy. If you go to the larger plant contingent, things like proteas absolutely have no interest in mycorrhiza whatsoever. You can do what you want to, a protea won't even look at the mycorrhiza. Tomato will double its size within 2 or 3 weeks if you give it mycorrhiza. So they're the obligate guys, they need mycorrhiza, and then there are the indifferent guys. They're enthusiastic, but they're not really interested. Does that answer your question?
What does one use to reintroduce mycorrhiza to one's plants?
I will send the address and the product. I'll give a snapshot as well and send it to Gerard, and he can disseminate it to you.
Put it onto the WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And
if anybody feels, like I said, the initial buying price is a bit steep, but if you think you're going to use less than a sort of a teaspoon tipful of it, 5 or 6 or 7 of you can club together. Just keep it in the is it fridge or deep freeze? In the fridge, in a dry environment. It can last for a year, but if a lot of you buy it together, then you can sort of inoculate your plants and get away with it.
And then the organic fertilizers, are they specific companies only that make them, or because I really only know the inorganics?
Look, there's Talbon and there is Ocean. Is it Ocean or Atlantic or Ocean Atlantic, or those are the 2 main players. There's a lot of the vermicast crowd. There's nothing wrong with their stuff. And I suppose, especially if you move into the pot plant culture, you can play with vermicast. Once you start moving into open beds, don't. It just becomes expensive. And if you feed your soil well enough, there will be earthworms there and they will do vermicast for you. Compost tea, ignore. Just ignore it. It's a lot of expenditure and all the rest of it, which you can overcome by just composting your plants. And when you water it, it will make its own tea and feed whatever is downstairs.
And then you made a comment about lemon trees and magnesium sulfate, which I think is Epsom salts. Yeah. I've tried Epsom salts things myself, and ever since I Epsom salt my lemon trees, they produce like crazy. But you were not too happy about that idea, and actually my trees are not happy either. So I'd like to hear your take on that.
I haven't ever done a sort of a proper Google search or a Google Scholar search to see why magnesium sulfate will produce. But the principle that you should steer clear of, if you go, and I have really seen recommendations for just throw a cupful down. A cupful down is a couple of million molecules of magnesium and sulfate, which means you're going to saturate the immediate area around your lemon tree. All your bacteria is going to hold on to, you just don't do it. If you really want, and if magnesium sulfate is really all that efficient, then work some into your compost heap, and after 6 months to a year, take it out. And then if your tree needs magnesium sulfate, it will say Rosa magnesium sulfate, and that will be mobilized. But to give it in a water-soluble form is really, it's looking for trouble.
You mentioned that compost and things like that should be placed on the surface of the ground. But
this is for your succulents. This is for your succulents, okay?
Yes, but even those, the succulents grow between grasses, and the roots of the grasses is really what makes a lot of the humus in the grassland, not the leaves themselves. Isn't there an argument that the compost, if you can, I mean, perhaps make your compost out of root material rather than leaf material, that should be underground?
Okay. There were several tests done in Eastern Africa. Excuse me. So if you go into a grass veld and you break the soil, you are not going to find the same consistency as you would when you go into a forest, for instance. The forest will have this very wah, wah, wah. The grass veld is much like the high veld. But if you analyze for carbon, grass veld's carbon can be between 40 and 50%. Okay. And it's there not as a compost or a mulch, it's there as some form of carbon itself. Very active, because when they plow the grasslands, within 3 weeks, the carbon falls from, let's say it was 40%, it falls to below 20%. And all it means is the oxygen got to the carbon dioxide went into the sky, and the carbon in the ground went down, the carbon value in the ground. So there is one or two companies that actually sell activated carbon, and you can use that in your mixes. It actually produces quite a good plant. I think the major thing against it is it can be quite costly. But again, as a society, you can negotiate, buying a 50-kilo bag, which will cost you something like 500 rand, and then you don't need. You can actually calculate volume, carbon. X carbon in this pot is going to give me about, and if you can aim for 20%, that is where things start to happen organically very well. But the carbon will feed your bacteria, not the plant.
What about charcoal?
Yes, charcoal's good, but it depends who makes the charcoal. If it's any of the companies that provide for, the outlet for the Saturday briars, don't, because they invariably add paraffin or some organic compound to make it burn better, and that'll ignite faster. Or so, if you can get proper old harder cool charcoal, yes, 100%, good stuff.
Would you put in chunks, or will you put it small and sort of ground down to make almost a powder?
I would grind down and put it in the mix immediately. Just remember, the moment you start grinding down, is you're making your reactive surfaces more and more and more.
Oh.
So let's take a briquette, which you must definitely not use. A briquette has only got the top and the bottom. It's like this little oval thing. If you grind it up and you have a cup full of powder, you can imagine this surface area has now been trimillionfied. So if you grind it up, put it into the soil immediately. So it can't sort of spark off with oxygen and become carbon dioxide.
And what about ash? I know ash is probably completely sterile, so it's probably not a good idea, is it?
Ash can be a two-edged sword. If your soil flora is cool, ash is cool. Like I said, I wouldn't put 20 kilograms of ash on a tree. That's going to be overdose. But you can definitely throw ash around in your garden, because the bacteria will take hold of all those nutrients. You're quite right. It's quite sterile. So they'll take the nutrients, convert them into bacteria, held down stuff. So ash, yeah, just go gashly.
But ash is also low in carbon, isn't it?
Ash, I think, is absolutely absent in carbon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's why I say I wouldn't use ash in a pot plant. I would use ash in my garden.
Or in the compost.
In the compost, perfect. And then, if you want to know about it, the men will like this. In France, the men are not allowed to go to the toilet to wee. They must go outside, where all the ashes of the ovens are kept. and they were into that bucket. And the French published an article about last year somewhere, where that urinated ash performs on par with the best organic. But I think what happens is the bacteria in the urine start working through this lot. So if you feel adventurous, you can have a little bucket out there. I've tried it, it does not smell very well.
Only males.
Any
Only males.
women have got the wrong attachments.
You'll be surprised.
So would you say that if I've got a large collection of mesems, that I should actually buy one of those mycorrhiza things? But if I've got other things like aloes or euphorbias or pachypodiums or that sort of thing, that I'm actually wasting my time with mycorrhizas?
The answer will demand a very sort of scientific knowledge of which of your succulents will use mycorrhiza or not. What I will do, again, this is getting onerous now, is I will contact Marianne, because she's quite knowledgeable. Let me try that again. She's quite knowledgeable about what is an obligate mycorrhizal plant and what not. I will also see if I can get some literature in America, because they also sort this thing out. But I would, that's the sort of one treatment you can hang 10 with, you can, in 2 weeks' time, start doing it. In the meantime, I'll try and find as much data on that specifically. So if you have, I know pachypodiums, which would be, what family is that now? That's your, they've just been relegated to Apocynaceae. Okay.
Yeah, they're part of Apocynaceae.
They're obligate mycorrhizals, so you can give that to them. I'm not sure about the crassulas at all. And what else? The mesems I know are obligate mycorrhizals. What else is in the succulent world? Come on, guys. Aloes, I don't know. But I can find that out. So within a day or two, I will mail Gerard and tell him this is what I found. And then he can drop it on your WhatsApp group. And then off you go. Hang on,
We'll just put it into the next newsletter so that everybody gets it.
okay, yeah. How you play the data I send you is entirely up to you.
Okay.
Either that or put it onto the members only WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Erhard is a question about liposomes. And somebody before that had a question about the rock.
Yeah, so Gail said, what type of rock is suitable as the mother material for rock dust? So I've only ever seen, yeah, sorry, I can't think of the word now. I've only ever seen basalt rock dust.
That's the best one for.
Okay.
It's the highest in elemental count. Like I said, it hovers between 76 and about 80.
Mm.
As you go down from there, if you look at granite, for instance, granite is 50% silicon dioxide, which is totally inert.
Oh.
And just as a matter of fact, and you can do this, plant a couple of what are they called? Knitbone.
Actually, here, I see, thank you.
What is knitbone? Knitbone. Comfrey.
Okay.
You can either plant comfrey or horsetail. Those are two plants that can actually mobilize. We don't know how, but they do. They can mobilize silica, which very few plants in nature can do. So if you have comfrey in the garden, you just cut off the leaves and put it in your compost heap. Make it a small, let's say, 50-liter compost heap. And you know that the silica in that thing will be much higher. Silica improves resistance to frost. It builds stronger cell walls. The Americans actually now say silica is more important than nitrogen. You get this funny picture that's following that. Okay. There's just one here, liposomes. Liposomes applies to everything that's alive, even to you. it is a very young science. Now we know how to make them, and I can see at least 4 or 5 doctorates coming out of that lot. At the moment, there's more things we don't know than things we do know, but it's like driving a car. While it's going good, if it breaks down, well, I'm not the mechanic. But it is fantastic stuff. It's
But
just
now, what is a liposome? I've always thought that it's like a balloon made of an oily material containing something that is oil soluble. Am I right?
liposome is any oil is a liposome. So whether it's castor oil, your cooking oil, olive oil, we would refer to that as liposomes. Liposomes by themselves hover between 1,000 microns and up. So liposome naturally occurring is too big for transdermal application. If you Google liposomes, the whole world knows what you can do with liposomes. Because once you go in vivo in the laboratory, in vitro, you can manipulate things and wow, check what we can do. But out in the real world, nobody can do it because of the actual liposomal size. And this is the IP of the guy in Paris. He's managed to split them. So by splitting them, he got the size down to between 20 and 80 nanometers. He made them water soluble. They've been stable for some of the bottles more than 10 years. So where a bottle of olive oil will go rancid, a bottle of olive liposomes won't go rancid. And the properties remain exactly the same. And even in that, there's a lot of questions tied up, like, what the hell is going on here? But once it's liposomal, or we refer to them as nanods. Once they're nanodal, the transdermal, whether it's on your skin, on your dog's skin, on the plant's bark, on your lithops, whatever, 30 seconds and it's inside the plant. And also they're hollow, so you can start manipulating, but we don't want to do that. So at the moment we're hogging the whole thing. Elsewise the guys will just put NPK in liposomes and we'll be back to the same picture where you're force feeding your plant.
Are the liposomes basically just carbon? Is that what we're talking about?
No, you get various oils. Some oils go down to what we call C4, which is what in biological term, that's a low grade oil. You can go up to C22, which is a high grade oil. And it really, once it's in the plant, like I say, they zick off to the jasmonic acid sites. And the jasmonic acid site is the powerhouse of your plant. That's where all things happen, especially immunity. And we started looking at that because of, the borer beetle in Joburg. We can cure the fungus now, but then the poor tree is still looking pretty sorry because you must remember it was now throttled for a year or two. It could nearly not move water or nutrients up and down. And this is how and the results are absolutely phenomenal. Liposomes can be similar. Yes, who's that? Error. Liposomes is a transport medium. It's more than a transport medium, but it is. If you speak to any scientist, they say, oh, it's a transport medium. So yeah, that's quite right. Okay, there I was still trying to read that one. Each part has been used as something. If you like, would you add something to Joburg water, watering substance, or just rely on potting? I would just rely on my potting medium. Who was this? Let me just scroll down. Error. I wouldn't add anything to the water because then you're back to water soluble. So you have to play in your mind with what do you perceive that your plant needs and get that in the organic form. But yeah, vastly different to orchids. I mean, anybody that's grown an orchid knows that you work with parts per million, not grams per square meter. So yeah, but no, Joburg water, if it's municipal water, you're fairly safe. It's more or less been pH stabilized, it's taken out most of the salt. So it's definitely not the best thing on earth, but it's better than some boreholes around. Boreholes can really skew a picture for you. So I wouldn't diss municipal water. It's acceptable. I have nothing more to say. Don't look at me.
I think we're all sort of shell shocked and thinking, and
Yeah, no, we have to unlearn some of our misconceptions here.
I like you. I like you.
Yeah, no, we're going to have to take a step
people,
back.
when you start walking this road, just unlearn. And whenever I give a talk here, I make very sure that I don't invite any specialists, because once you've been trained in a certain direction, it's like a horse with eye flaps. That is what you see. And you measure everything and anything you encounter against that training. We've lipidized just to see how various interactions, some of the old banned poisons, okay, banned because everything on the market's got resistance against it. And two things happened. We used not this ban. It doesn't matter. It was a hydrocarbonate poison. Okay, but it's taken off the market. You still get a bottle here, a bottle there. And our question was, if you lipidize it, and if you lipidize it, it becomes 100% active again. Everything that it was published again, that thrips are resistant to this and worms are resistant to this, they all died. Okay, so that answered our one question. What happened is, if you had something like powdery mildew, powdery mildew died overnight. And now an insecticide that's turned into a fungicide. We don't understand that. So at the last talk, there was somebody that was a scientist and he said, that is totally impossible. Insecticides can't kill fungi. And that's exactly the type of thinking you don't want. I'd rather somebody spin me a long yarn where you might find elements of truth in, than a trained person trying to tell me what he learned at varsity. I did the same, thank you. We have to, and that's where you are right. You have to unlearn the things we've been taught. Because a lot of the things we've been taught is, like, I mean, fertilizers, just get rid of them. Get rid of them. We don't need them. We didn't need them before 1900. Why the hell do we need them now?
I think there's a parallel situation for mothers of young babies. So a generation ago, apparently a really good housewife would actually start sterilizing the floors when the baby started crawling, so that baby wouldn't pick up all the bacteria. And nowadays, doctors say to mothers, throw away your antibacterial soaps. Throw them away. Because
absolutely.
It is actually bad for you not to be exposed to those bacteria. And in fact, yeah, I think that if we as people live in an environment that is too sterile, that doesn't have enough bacteria, it's not good for our immune system, it's not good for anything. And in fact, that part in our life when when a baby starts mouthing things is actually highly important for its entire development as a human, not only in terms of the immune system. So yeah, I think that's maybe, so I must tell you that I've got the same thing as Keith. For me, this is a paradigm shift, a complete paradigm shift, that I have to look after the soil biota as opposed to the soil chemical content.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I picked up in literature the other day a medical report on, it wasn't immunity, it was, but something related to immunity, and how it spiked now with COVID, because everybody is washing and sterilizing and mopping down and and the kids are actually suffering because the bottom line was the kids don't have the same immunity as 10 years or 15 years ago, because everything they touch is now 100% sterile. So they don't get all these wonderful bugs into them. And as a result is when anything sort of whacks on them, they don't have the immunity to fight it off. So I think the gist of the article was they're seeing a spike in children's illnesses because of corona, but not because of the bacterium corona, because of what we as human beings perceive to be the right thing to do. Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, these soaps with killed everything known to mankind, and 99% of all that, throw them in don't buy them. Make it somebody else's problem of how to get rid of them.
So shall we try the rock dust on the kids as well?
Actually, you can.
Your kids to do the gardening, they'll eat the stuff.
Yeah.
No, here's the funny thing. We sort of looked at rock dust hard and spoken to quite a few research doctors, and they said, well, something like rheumatism is actually a byproduct of bad feeding. So now whether it's an excess of carbohydrates or a lack of whatever else. So I went to visit my mother in December, and she had a bra on. So the bra clips get done in front and then they get reversed. So the cups come to the front, and I said to her, what are you doing? And she said, no, she can't get her hands behind the back anymore. So I put her on a capsule of rock dust plus EM. And when I saw her again in April, she very proudly said, look, I can fasten my clasp behind my back. So yes, you can give rock dust to people.
I'll give it a go.
We need a new Minister of Health. Do you want to volunteer?
Oh, do I get the same access to packages as Mkhize?
Liposome shape.
Yeah, so yeah, do.
I've just received a private message here with a question. It says that there are lots of makes and formulae, both solid and liquid, for EMs. Are they equally active and to be trusted, or is there some smoke and mirrors? Are we looking for reputable brands here, or do we just go with whatever?
I'm just trying to think. I will send that company to Gerard as well.
Oh, awesome.
I go with them because the guy that's in control of that was taught by EM came to being where a Japanese professor decided that it must be the bacteria in the soil. So what he did is he cultivated monocultures, ding, 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 ding. And it didn't matter what the hell he did, he had no accelerated growth. So his annual leave or his sabbatical came on, and he sort of made a calculated guess like, this is not going to work. He's barking up the wrong tree. And he took all his cultures and turfed them out just outside his office. And when he came back from his sabbatical, the grass was 6 foot tall. And he suddenly realized, my God, it's not the one, it's a sum total of all these bacteria working together and holding hands and hunting together. And he's the guy that taught this Durban-based. So I use them. I cannot judge anything else that's in the marketplace because I just haven't looked at it and compared and all the rest of it. It'd be very unfair for me to slate it. So I just use the guy I knew because I knew the Japanese guy and he taught this guy in Durban. So it's sort of familiar ground for me. There might even be better stuff on the market, but I wouldn't know.
No, but it's a great starting point.
Okay, do you have any more questions? Anyone else who's got something that they'd like to be enlightened about?
Yeah, I've always thought of eelworms as not good. And now what you're saying is that eelworms are good. The other thing is I've never actually seen one because I've never looked for one, but I think they're minute. They're about like a millimeter or something.
Yeah,
Or
I don't think you can see them with the naked eye. I think you need amplification for sure.
right.
I'll tell you a little bit about the work we're doing on eelworms. What we have found looking at plant pests is fusarium is possibly responsible for about 70% of the plant disease in the world. And we're now speaking agricultural crops, okay? If you think of bananas, they have Panama. If you think of olives, they have, oh, what's that? Not Klebsiella, the other one. In any case, but there are a lot of, the 5 or 6 that I can think of immediately, which is like bad news. The Italians and Portuguese and Spanish guys are chopping out olives just to try and stop the spread of this. So what happens is in a natural system, your eelworm will go and literally just consume the root tip. Okay, and that would be its food. It would then get the root to branch, and so it's a good system. In that system, I suspect and expect that the plant actually feeds the eelworm as well. So it's soft, and we now go in with a lot of nutrients and fertilizers, and we knock the hell out of the system. And now I find that virtually every bad disease in the world at the moment is caused by eelworm. So there's a symbiosis between
Virtually every what?
Bad disease. Panamas in the bananas, Phytophthora even. I wish I can just think of the bloody thing that's eating up the olives. But we find that somehow, due to the reduced buffer in the system, because of our sort of throwing down water solubles, fusarium and the eelworm has made a pact. Now, whether the pact is that the eelworm will take the fusarium to the plant and the fusarium will then sort of digest the root so it becomes available to the eelworm, I don't know. But from the moment the eelworm carries that fusarium or whatever into the plant, all hell breaks loose, because then, of course, the fungus sort of migrates into the plant. So we're looking at, we should be looking at how to get systems back to normal. If you have an explosion of eelworms, you have stuffed it up. It's nothing to do with the plant or the environment. It's the owner. Guavas, we have a thing. If I look at the number of guava orchards being chopped out, I would say by the end of next year, you won't be able to buy guavas in this country. And that is an eelworm with accompanying fungus. So whereas they were a very good and necessary part of the original system, they are now hellishly threatening. I think that could be a good word for it.
How can one find out whether you've got an eelworm problem in your garden?
Get out.
If they're not visible.
Okay. For most plants, if you dig them up, it's not all eelworm, but I would say 80% of them, they usually make sort of huge tubers on the roots, or small tubers, depending, you know, on so you can just see. Do you know what rhizobium looks like on bean or fabaceae roots? When you dig up a bean plant, it's got little
bean plants with these little knobs on, but that's a
yeah.
good relationship.
Eelworms look like that. Yeah, those little knobs, it's fabaceae, it's rhizobium, and it's a must. They need the rhizobium to transpose nitrogen for them. But that's what eelworm infestation looks like. You're having trouble loading your feed. Oh, well, I might disappear in a cloud of smoke now. Ah, there, I'm back. So that's what it looks like. Also, a plant that is troubled by eelworm, you can see the plant is not happy. So always a good idea if you've sort of done your level organic best to get a plant to, always a good thing to open up gently on the one side and just check what your roots look like. It might be a fungus chopping them, or it might be earworm.
How do you find them, man?
Sorry, I missed that question.
I don't think Herb was asking a question.
No,
No, but we heard you, Herb.
I'll mute myself again. It's
Tell me, liposomes and things like that, is that comparable to, I don't know, some people suggest putting dishwater into your gardens.
Please don't do that.
Just, yeah, it's just sort of, that's what you hear people talk about.
If you want to use dishwater, this is why the organic freaks have sorted out grey water systems for you.
Yeah,
That's to break down the substances in soap, which could dissolve all your liposomes in the soil if you use it just as is. So you can
okay.
imagine everything you want to keep in the soil is now going south because you've added some sunlight green liquid to it. So look, when your soil is healthy, even the whole thing about DDT became an issue because it happened at the same time as we sort of really maxing on throwing NPK around. So, but in a normal situation, a DDT molecule will come past and all the bacteria will go, "Hell, this McDonald's open," because they can go in and just disassemble the whole thing very happily, very fast. Okay. But if all your bacteria are tied up holding down NPKs, then you're in the shit.
Okay, any more questions? Any suggestions?
I have one question. Have you any comment on bone meal?
Bone meal is possibly, especially if you know you're on in a phosphate deficient system, it is your best source of phosphate. Do not buy the water. Phosphate is quite a baddie, and once it's in the soil, it's hell of a difficult to get rid of it. So I made a scene because I wanted a bag of bone meal, and somebody said, "Oh, we've got this phosphate," and I said, "I don't want the phosphate, I want bone meal." And the guy says, "It takes 10 years to break down," and I said, "That's why I want it." The 10 years is what we go after. So bone meal, stamp of approval.
Thank you.
Also onto the surface, or would you dig it? I mean, we dig it in when we transplant a plant, but would you also apply it to the surface?
Bone meal, I would dig in for no other reason. If you don't dig it in, your cat and dog is going to discover it and most probably eat your lithops with it as well.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's us then.
I just want to say thank you. That was a lovely, lovely talk. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Very well. Thanks a million. Very interesting.
And thank you for challenging our preconceptions. It's always nice to have something that doesn't agree with you, so there's more room to learn, more stuff to try out, and also possibly a source of understanding for why some of the things we've tried haven't gone so well so far.
Yeah. To me, it's almost invariably is music to my ears when you say I've challenged your system, but there's no antagonism against it. You'll be surprised how antagonistic people can get if you challenge their value or their perceived value systems. You know, this is what I've been taught at school. Teacher was right then, and nothing ever changes. It's a static sort of relationship, and it's not. It's not. We live in times where, like I say, in 15 years' time, I would be highly surprised if you could still buy chemical fertilizer, because that whole thing is being redefined now.
Just help me again. Didn't get, what was the mother material of rock dust?
Basaltic lava.
Basalt.
Yeah.
Basaltic lava.
Basalt, yeah.
This
Basaltic.
guy sits in Port Elizabeth, and as they blow the roads in Natal to, you know, go to various places, he gets all the landfall, and they grind that up.
Okay.
Just to give you another little testimony for the whole of rock dust was discovered when Europe had their acid rain period, and the Schwarzwald started disappearing, and, you know, threw their leaves down and whatever, and there was one quarry that just did they just ground up rock for roads, to build roads. But the wind took the finer particles, which is what we would call rock dust, and blew it downhill. And within a year of this happening, or this rock grinding company opened, the Schwarzwald started coming back hale and hearty. And that's when they more or less realized that rock dust is very essential.
Would you differentiate that from, I mean, we know that areas where there are volcanoes, the soil is very rich and agriculture does well, but that would be more the ash than the rock dust itself.
I would say that's going to differ from volcano to volcano, because if you look at the Clarksdorp volcano, the one that moved Swartkoppen's 16 kilometers to the side, that was sort of not the best soil in the country.
Okay.
If you look at the folded belts in the Cape, that is possibly the shittest soil in the country. So I think it depends what's happening down there. And there I start getting very thin on knowledge.
Okay.
Down. When I die, I'm going to hell. I will investigate and report back.
Now, if I can maybe add something to that. You know, we had my daughter speaking on volcanoes, and the research on volcanoes is changing a lot in geophysics, and that is come about by the drones and the new techniques that they're applying to it. But if you think about it, that the Earth has these different layers, and they say a core of metal at the bottom, you know, daaronder woel die duivel rond and all those things. So you're mixing different chemicals, and I don't know if they know what you're getting out of it sometimes. So I would think the volcanoes are very different from one another.
Yeah, well, if you look at the Vredefort meteor, okay, that brought about, well, something like 10 years of everlasting night. But forget about that. When that whole interaction happened, gold was the result. So if you go out on Google Earth, you can actually see Vredefort, and you can see all the mountains around it. It's like, you know, the ripples of the pool. And those are gold rich. Quite a different system, Cullinan, rich with diamonds. Different system in Kimberley. So yeah, these things are, I think it's one of the most interesting branches of science, is geology and mucking around with the volcanoes.
And I think it's more complicated than even maybe what our understanding can perceive. So
Yeah.
Let's hope we find something that does good for our succulents.
Go
Herb,
forth
use
and be a
cement.
disciple, and you won't be unhappy with your disciple.
Okay, I'll let you know.
Okay.
But I thought your basalt and the Schwarzwald in Germany was interesting.
Yeah, well, they were the guys that first observed the beneficial effects of rock dust.
No, there was something before them that observed it. It was the trees.
They had acid rain because Germany is quite industrialized. So they have all these hydro, what is HE30? In any case, they have acid rain, and the trees were literally dying. And I think it is because these weak acids just dissolved whatever nutrients there were in the soil and washing them away. And then when this quarry opened, they saw the sort of the restoration of the downhill forest, and they
Benefit,
realized,
yeah.
So well, happy days that they did.
Oh. Just by the way, and this is something that doesn't relate to the succulents and that, but you know, I was looking at Elon Musk, and I thought what we actually need in this world, and the big problem is how do you store electrical charge? And you get the lithium batteries. So I said, let me investigate. Lithium is made out of salt, right? And the big salt pans are in South America around the Atacama Desert up there. Bolivia. Do you know who owns most of that salt? And the other half, I haven't told you who owns it, right, is America through shareholding in that. But the other half that owns it are those countries like the Chile and Peru and Bolivia and that. What do? They don't want to give it to anybody because they want the wealth for themselves. So, you know, it's an ongoing scarce resource thing. But that's just by the way. So maybe we'll find something.
Yeah, I was hoping Corona might clear out the innards of the planet so we end up about 1 million people, but it's not very effective, I fear.
Okay.
We need less people pressure. We need less people that think having $3 million in the bank is now you've made it as a human being, because you haven't. If you contribute to the ecology, then you've made it as a human being. Anything after that, and 7 billion people is just too much for this planet. It is just too much.
But Mike, Herb is touching on an interesting topic, and that's of trace elements, be it lithium, copper, magnesium, manganese, all these other things. I mean, going beyond the NPKs. Are these trace elements all present in all soils? It's just a matter of having the right mycorrhiza or bacteria to extract them?
No, they're not. And it's for the same reason that we just had with volcanoes now. You know, you can almost bet your last bottom dollar that the lava from one volcano in Hawaii is going to be vastly different to a volcano in Southwest, like Bukaros, or a volcano in the Rift Valley. Okay, and it's simply, if you could have a slice through it, it's where the volcano is active, what it's melting out of the surrounds, and spits up. So what you find is that usually the plants that grow in that specific soil has adapted to that. In North America, there are plants that grow on selenium soils. Selenium is actually quite phytotoxic. Plants have somehow adapted to utilize the selenium. As a matter of fact, they use those plants to indicate where they can mine selenium. Okay, so these are now the sort of neat little doily embroideries you see, like, wow, check this out, wow, check that out. So if you take any other plant and go plant it in those areas where selenium is at toxicity levels, it will most probably die. But that specific 1 or 2 plants used as selenium indicators. So I would say if you're in a very low, like in the Cape, there's very low organic material in the soil. Proteas just laugh at mycorrhiza. They have absolutely no interest in mycorrhiza, none. And it would make sense because the typical sandy soil of the Cape is not conducive to mycorrhiza. In the story, there's not enough organic material in the soil.
But proteas also need the trace elements. And I mean, there's the rock.
Proteas are a pain in the you know what, because number A is, if we speak phosphate levels here in Transvaal, we go to 20, 30 ppm. If you speak phosphate levels for proteas at 6 ppm, it's becoming toxic.
Okay.
So if you sit on the, oh God, I don't know where it is, this side or that side of the Machalis, and you have these deep sands, you can grow wonderful proteas. If you plant proteas here at random, they die within a week. I don't know whether it's self-defense or phosphate toxicity, but they die. The soil here is just too rich. So they might, and that's going to cost somebody to look at it. They might need micronutrients, but we don't know about it yet. Not at all. We just know they are very low demanders.
Like most succulents as well.
Yeah. Well, succulents, like I say, you know, the generalization would be they come from desert areas. That's why they're succulent. Desert areas very seldom have organic material in the ground. It doesn't say they don't have carbon in the ground, but they don't have organic material like a forest floor. So, yep.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for a challenging evening. And I think we've got a lot to digest and work through and get rid from our sheds in our gardens. And thanks everybody. Compost heap. No, I don't put my fertilizer onto the compost heap, or should I?
You can. Not 50 kilograms, but a kilogram on the heap. That will go a long way.
Okay.
Gently get rid of it.
Yes.
Fantastic. And tell me, Mike, sometime from now, can we as a society come and visit all your interesting plants that you've got at the back behind the nursery?
You can hear Gerard's been here before. Yes, you may. I would suggest you come in sort of middle to end October-ish.
Okay.
That's when the most flower power will be out.
Mm.
Oh, well, we look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Cool. We'll see you here.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks, Mike, and thanks everybody else. I think
Yes.
we've
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
had a
much.
great evening, and everybody stay safe and get your vaccine shot with the mycorrhiza.
That's against the law of the country.
I had to get that one in.
Okay, guys, speak to you, and I will send that data through to Gerard, and he can disseminate it to you guys.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Keep well, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye. Good night.